It's the Fellowship of the Geek Show, a weekly podcast about comics, the comic book industry, and other geek pop culture. Music courtesy of Manny the Martyr. And now, on with the show!
Hey there, everybody. It's the Fellowship of the Geeks podcast. My name is Thomas Chick, and joining me for this episode is Mike Marlowe.
Hey, gang.
And Les Webster.
Hello, all.
Unfortunately, Liz Newman could not be with us this week. We do miss her, and hopefully she'll be back with us next week.
Yeah.
So what's been going on with you guys? Y'all doing all right?
Uh-huh.
Doing good, thanks.
Peachy keen.
Hope everybody out there is doing all right. So what's been going on in your corner of the galaxy?
Well, I'm still watching documentaries about music. This has actually lasted longer than I thought it would, but sometimes my kicks don't last this long, but, whatever. The one this week is called Death by Metal. This came out in 2016, and it is about Chuck Schuldiner, who was the driving force behind the band Death, who, and I'm not going to be surprised if not a whole lot of people are familiar with Death. They were essentially kind of the original death metal band, not surprisingly given the name, but the band started in like in the early 80s. So it was kind of coming off of the coattails of the punk movement, and it kind of took music in a different direction. And this is kind of at the birth of metal to begin with, so it kind of spun off from there. And it's actually it's a really good documentary about really kind of a difficult subject for a number of reasons. Not the least of which is that Chuck was kind of really hard to get along with. So they're they talked to a lot of different people who were members of the band at some point, but most of them didn't last long because Chuck was just hard to work with. But yeah, and so on top of that, there is also a very sad ending to the story, but I'm going to make you go watch it. This is on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
I said, it's a really good documentary. Even if you're not real familiar with the music involved.
Yeah, I'm not.
Right.
Okay.
Well, for me, I've become somewhat addicted to a game online called Wordscapes.
Is this an intervention?
I think
well,
it's
he's already
probably
admitted
time.
to the problem, so I mean, it can't be an intervention if he's already acknowledged there's a problem.
Yeah, I just can't pull away from it. That's the whole problem. It's an interesting game. It's challenging, but I'm up to, I think, game number 500 something. And it's just one of those that you finish, you go, okay. And instead of getting up and walking away, I go to the next game. And it's just that they give you like 6 letters, and there's at least one word in the crossword that they give you that have all 6 letters.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other words are 4, maybe 3, but usually 4 to 6 letters. So it's one of those that makes you scratch your head. And I've been known to be up till 2:30 in the morning playing this and going, why are you doing this? Why don't you just go to bed?
Oh no, just got to do one more. Just one more.
Yeah. Yeah, and you start scratching the inside of your arm and things like that. So the jonesing is there.
Yep, you're an addict.
I've played a version of that. I think it's called Word Connect or something like that. But I can see how it's addicting.
Yeah, I've played a version of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and I eventually, well, the version I had downloaded on my phone, and it was apparently attempting to burn out my phone, so I had to delete it. Fortunately, so I didn't get too addicted. But yeah.
Burn out your phone.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, my phone would like heat up while I was playing this game, and I mean to the point where I was having trouble holding it. It was that hot, and I was like, okay, I can't do this. I need my phone. I can't watch it. I can't watch the smoke come out. That's not good.
Jeez.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. It was definitely overclocking the processors.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned playing a game, because I actually started playing a game that I didn't realize I had access to before, again. I first started playing about a year or so ago, when it was available on Facebook. And when I first got on Facebook, I was like everybody else. I got on the games and I got really burned out, especially when they got to the point where you either had to pay for everything, or you had to ask other people to send you stuff so you can complete missions or tasks, that kind of thing. And that just got so irritating that I stopped playing games on Facebook totally. But I think it was about a year or so ago, I come across a game on Facebook called, it's a Star Trek game. I don't know if it was actually the same, if they had changed the name or not to the game that I'm playing now, but it's the same game, more or less. The game I'm playing now is called Star Trek Timelines. Hey, Mike!
Oh boy!
And the whole premise is there is a tear in time, and it has come to the attention of Q. So Q is kind of advising you a little bit while you're trying to put together your team and you're completing all these missions. And with it being a thing with time, then you can actually use members from all versions of Star Trek. So you have people from Star Trek Discovery, you have some from the classic show, you have Next Generation, you have Voyager, you have Deep Space Nine. Haven't even count. Yes, there's some from Enterprise too. I just don't have them. So I've actually recently got back it because I found out that I had access to it. So I'm not playing it through Facebook, but it's kind of fun playing this again. And since I've already had some experience, I'm obviously doing things better and different than I did before. I know what the hell I'm doing now to a degree. And of course, they use some of they lift some of the dialogue from some of the shows. So, like if you hear, you see classic Kirk, you hear Shatner's voice from the classic show, but they actually brought John Delancey in for some of the dialogue.
Oh, nice.
From the get-go. Yeah.
Cool.
And it's kind of funny because, like, if you start it up and you start hearing the theme, you might hear him say, "Well, I hope you had a good time at Risa or wherever you were at," or "Picard would not make me wait." It's just some of these funny lines. Bonjour, mon capitaine. And it's just kind of fun. But it's been kind of an interesting game. Trying to get into it. So
cool.
Yeah.
And you haven't had to hit any of your friends up for resources yet.
Well, I mean, there's some of this stuff that, hey, here's the real rare stuff. But if you want this, then, yeah, pull out your credit card. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I can live without that special rare thing. That's fine. I can handle it with the rest of the stuff. And yeah, you don't have to hit up people for, that's the thing. I always got bugged me because when I was doing that before, I always helped other people because I saw it and go, okay, well, I'll help you, thinking there would be a reciprocation, of course.
No,
I'm begging and pleading. Yeah, I'm begging and pleading for stuff, and maybe at the last second I get everything I need to complete the task, and then, or maybe I won't. And I just said, like, screw this. It got so irritating that it was more doing that than actually playing the game. I'm like, then I'm not really playing a game. I'm begging.
Right.
And where's the fun in that?
It's like selling Amway or something. Nobody likes that guy.
And I don't think anybody really plays games on Facebook anymore. I don't think. So, which, I'm sure that took a lot of revenue away from them, but they figured out other ways to get revenue. But that's a topic for another show.
Facebook's making their money. They're fine.
Yeah. Which is a topic we will never get into because we're not really big fans of Facebook anyway. So why do we want to do an hour and a half of bitching and moaning? So
right.
There's more.
We've never done that for any topic.
No, of course not. Not at all.
Not an hour and a half.
No bitching and moaning here.
No.
Well, not for an hour and a half, unless Liz gets on her soapbox.
Oh, wow.
Dang. I wonder if she felt the bus hit her on that one since she's not even here. Oh.
That's okay. She won't listen to the episode anyway, so.
Oh, ow. Wow. 2 in a row. Damn.
She's backed up over her now.
And also, we had our most recent Eat and Gab, which was, I think it was a success. We had a nice little turnout. It was fun as always. And if you're a geek in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and forgot about us having our meetup, well, that's okay. We have another one coming up in August. It's going to be August 10th at 7 p.m., located at Wing City, which is at 1456 Beltline Road, Suite 120. That's in Garland, and the zip is 75044. It is our monthly meet and gab. You can come out and hang out with us, meet us, and discuss about things that are kind of going on just in the geek universe, whether it's TV, movies, comics, whatever. Or just show up and have some good food, because there's some good food at Wing City. So we highly encourage y'all to come out and hang out with us. It's always a blast, right, Les?
Yes, sir. Last night was a great time.
Mm-hmm. Great time had by all. Alrighty, for this week, we had a special occasion. We did an interview with Darin Henry, who's writer, publisher of Set Comics. I'm sure you've heard us talk about such titles as The Blue Baron, or Startup, or Supersuckers, The Z People. I can go on and on with the other books. But the next wave of binge books are coming out at the end of this month. So we had him on to kind of talk about the new books and how Set Comics came to be, and just his experiences of trying to get his dream into our hands or on our screen, because there's also digital comics, of course. So without further ado, here's our interview with Darin Henry. If you've been a long-time listener to this podcast, you've heard us talk about Set Comics. It's been a picks of ours several times. We've done reviews on their books. And for today's episode, we are fortunate enough to have Darin Henry, the writer-publisher of Set Comics. Not only wrote all the books, but he's also been writer-producer of several TV series, including KC Underground, My Family, Shaken Up. So we were fortunate to have him on just before his appearance at San Diego Comic-Con. So, Darin, thank you for joining us today.
It's very nice to be here, Thomas. Thank you. And, I enjoy your show, and I'm happy to be part of it for the first time.
Well, thank you. And this is just before the new wave of comics. We have three new books coming out in just a short period of time, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. 3 of our latest and greatest binge books. There's 64-page stories that are self-contained, all under one cover with the same price tag as a normal, 20-page story, $3.99. And yeah, they're debuting at the con this week, and then they'll be in select shops around the country, in U.S. and Canada at least, at the end of this month on July 31st.
That's awesome. New issue of Blue Baron, a new issue of Startup, and then a new series, Headhunter.
That's right. Headhunter #1. There's actually also one additional book that is being published for the con as a San Diego. It's an official exclusive for the con. It's the Barbara Macabra's Morbid Museum number 1.1, which is the 1.1 is because it's actually only a 32-page book. So it's not a binge book, but it's an anthology, so the stories are self-contained as well. And it just seemed like an opportunity to put something, special for it being my first time having a table at San Diego. It felt like it was worth submitting some book for the con people to make an exclusive, and they thankfully agreed to do that. And it's got a great Al Milgrom cover. Al has been part of the comics since the early 70s, certainly before I was even reading them. And he's this guy who, Marvel fans from that era, from the 70s and 80s specifically, will remember. He was a big editor and a writer as well as an artist, had many long runs on books like Peter Parker, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Avengers and West Coast Avengers, and he just is he's a good fit for the sort of stories that I'm telling with that Barbara Macabre series.
And this is the book that has been available digitally that was the one that we reviewed.
Exactly, yeah. It has an exclusive cover that is exclusive to the con that Al did as well. So it might be, at least in print, it will never be used as a print cover. It will pop up if there's a second half of the. If there's another digital installment, it would be used for the digital. But when it comes to print, this is the one and done for this show only.
That's cool. So if you're at the con, this was a fun book. I highly recommend picking up, especially with it being an exclusive cover. Get it. Definitely get it. It's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
Worth it. It's nice because it's unlike all the other exclusives that I've seen that are being sold at the con. This one's still only $3.99, which it turns out is the least expensive exclusive that the con that you can actually pay money for at the con. So I'm happy. Yeah. Because it's like the entry level is $5, and most of them are $10, $15, $30 for the same material you can get for a $4 cover price on the regular standard edition. So exclusive does not always mean expensive.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about $8 bottles of water too. So
Yeah.
You're
right.
You can get those a lot cheaper down the street too.
Yes, you can.
Well, I don't know about during that time. They may jack up the price everywhere.
You may have to go a long way down the street, but yeah.
Yeah. You might. It's definitely there's a lot of people who say that the prices on Tuesday are a lot cheaper than the ones that you see on Wednesday, and that's obviously because so many people just are flocking from LA or wherever they're coming from to be part of the con, and they see you coming as you'd expect.
Well, you mentioned the price point, so let's go ahead and start there. 64 pages for $3.99, which is the standard price for, like you said, the 22 or 32 pages. That I have to tell you that has been a big selling point when I talk about these books to other people. It's like you get the entire story arc for a price of just what is a first part or maybe a third part of a 5 or 6 issue story arc. So first of all, congratulations for doing that, and that's such a great idea.
Yeah, thank you. as much as it's from some perspective, publishing comics is my hobby because I work as a TV writer. I've been doing that for 25 years. I take it extremely seriously in that I feel like there are things coming from my, background in TV where people don't even think about paying for most of what they're watching, at least not the individual piece of entertainment. They may pay for the channel or they may pay for the hardware that they're watching it on, but they don't pay for the individual shows usually. And I just feel like there's this somehow this belief that we can change the audience just for the sake of comic books. And I think that we're seeing lower sales because there are other ways to be entertained that don't require you to take 6 trips to the comic store that may not be even near you and pay $4 a pop to get a piece of a story. So, coming from my background, I have a totally different spin on why you should be giving more for the least possible price. And it is helping to make me stand out, but I'm not doing it as much for that reason as I am because I feel like if the people that are willing to try a comic book that I publish are willing to actually pay money for it, the least they should be getting in return is a complete entertainment experience.
Nice. Well, let's back up a little bit. How did Sit Comics come about?
Well, I guess it goes even further back in my life to childhood. I always, I was a big comic book fan, and we're talking the late Bronze Age, I guess, when I was in my childhood, and then through the early 80s, I was sort of hooked on especially Marvel comics. And I drew my own stuff as well, or made my own comics, but I never tried like a Spider-Man or Captain America as much as I was a fan of them. I was like, maybe I just felt like the people making them already did them well enough that they don't need me to try. So I just made up my own characters. And I sort of put that, that little pastime away by the time I got to puberty, and I almost gave up on comics completely for other things in school. But, by the time I got back on track with my career in Hollywood in my 20s, I started to rediscover the comics, and I was, enjoying a good income as a TV writer. So I was starting to fill in the gaps that I'd had all those years ago as a collector. And I was really engaged again with comics. And at about the same time, not long after I got back into comics, they sort of changed again to Joe Quesada? I can never pronounce people's names, but the approach that he and the other guy there were taking with Marvel was to sort of, it seemed like they were just giving up on kids at all, and I felt like the kids the comics that were appealing to me were stuff that I could enjoy as a kid or as an adult, and now I felt like Marvel took a hard turn to the adult stuff that I wasn't as engaged by. And the only title I was still interested in was Spider-Girl, and that was the Ron Frenz drawn book that Tom DeFalco had sort of masterminded, and he had a few other series in that universe. And, as that series finally died, it was clear that I wasn't going to get back that feeling that I was getting from the books that I was enjoying when I was younger. So I started thinking about some ideas, and it grew into a comic book company. I mean, I really felt like there were enough, despite the glut of product, there's a few holes in the market, particularly with humor and, just bringing humor in. And I decided to invest some of my money into some ideas that I'd come up with for comics, and it was really a wonderful decision because I've had such a great ride doing these comics that it's almost impossible to imagine stopping doing them at this point. Was that the answer you were?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
You mentioned Ron Frenz.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I mean, the list of creators you have, are artists working on your books. I mean, Ron Frenz working on Blue Baron with Sal Buscema. Oh my God! You said you were a Marvel guy, so you should be on cloud nine for working on your characters.
Well, and it's great that they are such great people on top of all their talent.
Yeah.
They come across in every conversation I've ever had as just the most genial, positive, and supportive people that, obviously you're writing a check to them, but they also could say no because there are other people that want to hire them. And, it's just a really good environment to be creative, to have those guys involved. And, as a TV person, I'm constantly thinking of what what the equivalent of these people I'm working with would be in TV. And, yes, they're directors in the fact that they sort of frame the ideas into images that, will look attractive to the reader, but it's almost like casting, because they're the stars. As much as I'd like to think that, I'm writing a good story, I think that their visual approach and other artists like Jeff Schultz and Tom Richmond, and Blair Shedd, Craig Rousseau, I mean, I don't want to leave anybody out because every single one of them is like the star of the show, and you sort of cast based on the way the characters will look. And, Ron's just a consummate pro, and every character he draws just, he's the only person who I actually design the costume characters with. He and I, every time I come up with a new story, I get in touch with him with what I'm thinking for either the villain or some of the other costume characters, and he delivers these amazing images, which I occasionally share online on the Sitcomics Facebook page. But again, it's just like it's casting, because I give him these various things that I want the character to look like, and other things like a helmet or glasses or something, and it just always comes back in this. It's like this wonderful, exciting moment to see something that may have existed like that in my head, but it's an even better version of it, So it's just it's a thrill every time. And I talked to Sal this weekend and Ron, and they're just wonderful people.
Well, that's awesome to hear. And you talk about trying to bring back the feel and the vibe of comic books back in the day. Well, the two of them, and Al Milgrom, Jeff Schultz from the House of Archie. Oh my God, yeah, they're doing it. They're bringing it back. They're bringing that back. That's awesome.
Well, I think that there's just something about the the direct market, for the good it's done in at least keeping comics alive, if nothing else. And there's a lot more than just that. But it's the publisher's approach to the direct market that I think has changed comics more than anything, because they have this, especially the big two, they have this recognition that, hey, these 3,000 independent businesses can only survive if they buy from us. So we can do all these things that we want. They can pretty much do anything they want. And if these independent retailers want to stay in business, they have to buy the comics from those two companies, because they can't survive very long without them. So I think it's created this thing where the publishers are really just, in my point of view, and this may not be fair to the creators involved, but for the business people at those companies, are really just trying to sell product to 3,000 people, and those happen to be the people that own stores. And whether people who shop in those stores actually buy the comics is irrelevant, because without returnability, the retailers and the publishers are sort of stuck together no matter what. And when comics were returnable in the newsstand era, I feel like there was a little bit more recognition that things had to be accessible all the time, and accessibility was much more important, not just physical accessibility, because they were in stores that were supermarkets and drugstores that people went to whether they were interested in comics or not, and the fact that comics were there just made it a convenient thing. But I feel like the classic art styles were part of that accessibility. And to create a publishing company that's all about, it's not retro, it's classic, I feel. And the classicness of what they can do as artists is making it much more accessible than some of the other panel grids that, it's not inviting you to read and to understand how the story is being told. It's sort of inviting retailers who've seen everything at that point where they're deciding what to order, and it's sort of saying, you haven't seen anything like this. But the reason they haven't seen anything like this is because it doesn't really work with most of the people that would not be familiar with comics the way the retailers are. That's just a perspective. Whether I'm right or not, I have an opinion, and I'm happy to. I'm always happy to at least discuss opinions.
Well, and I think that the choice of styles, I think, also kind of adds to the way the story gets told. I mean, I think the prime example among the sitcomics crowd is Supersuckers. I mean, to do that in that, I mean, it's kind of in that Archie style. I mean,
yeah, it's absolutely, and it's Dan DeCarlo really, which is he's that artist who sort of the artist that Jeff Schultz is. He's the most in line with Dan DeCarlo's style, and Dan did DC comics, he did Marvel comics, he also did Archie, and he sort of brought that cartooning style to all those companies. And you could look at Millie the Model and go, wait, that's Archie, isn't it? But of course, it's just a cast of characters who look like they're drawn the same way as the Archie cast. But obviously, as long as the cast is totally different, you can do that.
Right, and to do that with a group of vampires.
Exactly.
I mean, it certainly puts that comedy spin on the horror, which makes it. I mean, it's really obvious when you start to read it what's going to happen, and I think that helps build the story. Honestly. Yeah,
and Jeff's such a talented cartoonist, and he's so good at bringing comedy. I mean, the guy is just a funny drawer.
Right.
It's like, I could write something, and I don't need to get too detailed in the dialogue. And in fact, I avoid trying to do too much of the joke writing until after I see the pictures. I do know what the attitude needs to be and what the expressions should be, and I give a very, very bad version of the dialogue to Jeff. But everything he comes back with, it just delights me, and it's usually with either a smile or a giggle when I see how he's executed what I've asked for, and that's so fun. I mean, that it doesn't write itself, but I do feel like it gives you so much more. It's like this huge arsenal of comedy that you can just tip in to finish the shot, to use a basketball term. He's got it right up there, and it's a perfect assist, and you just have to follow through on that moment.
Let's talk about the rating system that you have for the sitcomics. I thought it's interesting that you base the rating off of basically what would be shown on TV in the evenings. How did that come about?
I don't think I care for the current rating system. I think it's too nebulous. All ages can include some graphic Punisher stuff, and it can include. It's basically anything that's not mature. I don't even think there's another rating. And I just felt like there's got to be a clearer, simpler way to translate the appropriateness of the content to people who, are again not familiar with comics, and certainly not with the rating system. And the comics code was, it's a double-edged sword, the comics, because obviously it stunted a lot of the creativity that was coming out in the early 50s, but it also sort of reined in some of the extremes that were getting kind of out of hand. And it sort of shaped the comic book business for allow things like Marvel to happen, which was, still child-friendly, escapist superheroes that were done realistically, more relative to the DC heroes. But I just felt like the Comics Code Authority, you can't bring that back, but at least you can relate as a parent. I have 2 young kids now. As a parent, you can relate to, even if you're watching streaming, you understand that the later you get, the more mature it is. And I should probably put All Times Eastern on there, because I know that that's not necessarily time for all time zones, but it just seems to make it simple and clear that from when you hit the 9 o'clock hour and later, I haven't got anything later, but you better be aware that this is not necessarily going to be for the littlest ones.
Right. And the feedback I have received on that was very positive. They like the idea.
Yeah, it's fun, and I think that it's just another thing to sort of warm people, because you always at conventions, anytime you're with anyone who's got a kid or who's shopping for a kid, that's almost the first question out of their mouth when they're willing to stop and listen to your pitch. Mm-hmm. What age is this appropriate for? And I think that, I'm glad the time slot was I've had that rating system on the books since before I did any conventions, but I think it was a thing to just easily explain to parents what they're in for. And I'm glad I did it. I'm certainly happy that I did. I don't put any kind of trademark on that either. If there's any other publishers who find that to be a clever or a nice way to explain it, I think that I would be all for people using that, because the more transparency that we can have as publishers for the general public, I think the better off we'll be.
Yeah, and the consistency doesn't hurt either.
Yeah,
if you can build that, if you get multiple publishers doing it, it would benefit everybody.
Yeah, but I only say it. I don't presume anyone will take me up on it.
Right.
But it's certainly something I feel like it's worth doing for me. And if they, I don't know how late most publishers, I think, don't even start before 10 p.m. So maybe that's irrelevant. But I just feel like I'm a family. This is a family-owned business. I consider it, with my wife and my children, and I feel like I want it to be as obvious to other parents, like I say, what they're getting into. The binge book format. One more thing about it. It's, I sort of feel like the importance of the binge book. It's back again. It's like I think of these things in terms of the context within the entire history of comics. But you think back to like the beginning of comics, the pages, and I'm pretty confident that I remember looking at pretty much anything else that was being published as a magazine. They were all 10-cent things. So I feel like the lowest price point you can do compared to the other possible entertainment is the best way to go. And it's essentially, the binge book is essentially a golden age format. 64 pages for the lowest possible price, and right now the lowest price seems to be about $3.99, at least for most publishers. And and then I try to incorporate the format of the golden age, but also the sort of the new characters, that the imagination of the silver age with the story complexity of the bronze age. You have a 64-page story as opposed to just settling for a 20-pager. And then, the printing of the modern age, and the format is sort of perfect for our binge age. So, it's sort of thought through without like planning it. It's so almost a lot of it's intuitive, and also it's sort of default the things that make the most sense to me. And I think that, again, that stems from the fact that I'm coming from an outside world of entertainment. I worked on Seinfeld and Futurama and all these other shows, and I'm used to having an audience in the millions without having to sort of ask them to watch it. So I'm sort of always thinking of what I can do to entertain the most possible people.
And if only that were a more obvious thing to the rest of the comics industry.
Yeah. It's what it is. People want to make money. People have chosen to make comics as their way of making money. I really feel like if I were a dictator, and that we play that game, if you could control the way the industry worked, I think that it would benefit comics to always have a satisfying entertainment experience for whatever a person's willing to pay for. And if the model price is $3.99, you could conceivably put out 3 issues of a comic at once and do that every 3 months, do a quarterly book. So if you have 100 Marvel books, you'd suddenly have 33 Marvel monthly books, and you'd put them out every quarter. That would give retailers 3 months to sell each issue before the next one came along, and they would order more, and you'd probably have a lot of the. I still suspect that there are a lot of people who watch those Marvel movies who wander into a comic store and try a comic, and the format is just pushing them back out of the store again. And I think that if they were really set on trying to get people who try comics to stay with them, the first thing they should change is the format. The content, whether somebody's writing a good story or not, it's impossible to tell sometimes because so little available real estate in that format to really have anyone be able to tell whether they like the story.
Right.
And if you can't tell, and if you pay money and you can't tell by the end of that experience whether you actually enjoyed it, chances are you're not going to keep experimenting to find out if you do.
Right. You have to commit to something that you're spending a little bit of money over time. People don't have that kind of patience. Not anymore.
And I think exactly. And I think the trade paperback, it may help get publishers to get retailers to buy the same story again, but I don't think that that's as appealing a format when you consider their 20. I'm sure fans who really cared about the stories that are being collected don't see that as an obstacle to trying it, but or to buying. But I think that a lot of people, they're not going to look at that $20 or $30 for a complete story and think, well, that's a solid deal, because they're getting 100, 200 episodes of shows that they love for a $10 monthly fee from many of these streaming services, and they don't have to think twice about whether it's a good deal. But holding a book in your hands that you've not read before or that you have no history with and expecting to, be happy about spending $20 to $30 for it, I just think that that's creating this huge gap between what people are wanting and what people are willing to pay for.
Well, I wanted to come forward and say that you guys are doing a spectacular job. I finished the Blue Baron number 3 and was totally engrossed.
Oh, that's great.
To have the twists you have, to have the character names are phenomenal. And to take the character all of a sudden into another dimension, yet not leave him there, so I have to buy issue 4
right
to see what transpires.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the story is trying to have a lot of twists and turns, because I like stories as an audience, like stories that sort of take you on several different. You wanna feel like you're not being strung along as well. So the binge book allows me to give you the whole story for in one sitting. You can stop at any point and put a bookmark in, or you could just go on the ride as it's been built. And yeah, because digital comics don't sell out, you can't be frustrated at the digital newsstand that you missed an issue. So I split the binge books into 3 digital chapters, and there's breaking points where he would be stuck, but the goal is to get you to keep reading digitally, and you can always find that next issue. So I'm happy to hear you got into it.
Oh, by far, yes. I was one of those that came on when the Sid comics first appeared. A young man told me to try this out. His name is Thomas. And he was right.
He was an early adopter, I know.
And I ended up buying 2 or 3 sets so I could say, here, try these.
Yeah.
And give them to somebody and then say, they say, do you want them back? No. I just want you to read them so you know that that is what is out there now.
And I think that's the goal. I really do have that, because I think that you could have done that 30, 35, 40 years ago, and people would have had that inclination or the impulse to share the stories with other people is definitely something you have to think twice about now when it's so expensive and you're giving them maybe not a complete experience. So I'm really happy to hear that you saw that you saw the binge book format and the comics, the stories being told in them, as something that you felt strongly enough that you would be happy to just buy a copy for someone else. And I think that's a huge compliment. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Otherwise, if I didn't care for it, I sure wouldn't have picked up number 2.
Mm-hmm.
But these are so well done, and having that complete story right there.
Yeah.
I can, like you said, I can put it down, walk away from it for a while, and there have been times that I've done that just to clear my head going, wow, what just happened? And that's what the fun of it was.
Yeah, you're in control. It's like you can pause a TV show, and obviously you can do the same with the comic because you're the only thing that's keeping it going. So it's you're in the time frame, and you're alone, and you have nobody interrupting you, and you can get engrossed in a story. Yeah, take the ride from beginning to end, and that's the way it should be. But you don't always have that luxury.
True.
So, which of the books were the first one when you decided you were going to create sitcoms? You go, okay, well, this is the first book, the first title I'm going to do. Just out of curiosity.
It was the quartet of titles. I had sort of envisioned it as almost a trade paperback,
mm-hmm.
and where I'd collect the 4 different titles, which were What is Telepathetic, and The Blue Baron, and Supersuckers, and Z People. Now, Z People took the longest to actually show up because we had some. It took me a while to get the artist that we ended up doing it with, and I think that some of that delay sort of hurt its impact because the market had sort of been zombied out to the point where that book finally got out. But
I can't imagine what you're talking about.
It definitely was a case of that the idea was to get 4 different stories, like a short story collection, but with pictures.
Okay.
And the Blue Baron was an idea that I'd had, because maybe 10 years before or 15 years earlier, it was an idea that I had, like a rare dramatic idea, because I don't really think that way, but it was like this kind of corrupt business person and this kid who didn't realize he was corrupt, and they were going to get in an accident where they switched bodies, and I don't even think it was a superhero idea, but I got Sal Buscema on the phone, and he was agreeing to work with me, and he recommended Ron, who I didn't really need recommendation for because I was a huge Spider-Girl person, but he wasn't penciling anymore, and then I hung up the phone. I realized, oh my gosh, I need to get a book for these guys, and at that point it wasn't anything. So I sort of racked my memory and thought through that story about the business person and the kid who switched bodies, and I realized that it could be a really funny superhero premise, and I went for it. And it didn't take me long to plot out that first story. I think it started as a 30-page story, and it grew as I was working on it before Ron even saw an outline or anything. I think it might have been in the 40s when he first saw it, and then I got it up to where around 50-something that it ended up being. But that was the most Marvel style, where it was just like, here's what I'm thinking, and I worked out. The first time Ron sent me his thumbnails, I was kind of thrown because I had envisioned a different scenario playing out, and I'm sure I still have those thumbnails somewhere, but I just couldn't write the flow of the dialogue the way I had hoped I would. So I reevaluated how to do it, and I came up with what I call a panel outline, which I'm sure is not the official term for it, if it's actually officially termed. But it was like I came up with this where I knew what the scene consisted of, and I had to, like, because I'm such a dialogue person from writing TV, especially comedy, you got to sort of have these voices flowing from one to the other. So I would think up what happened in each panel, and once I did that, and Ron sent back his thumbnails, it was like, oh, okay, now I know exactly what the conversation is, even if I don't know any of the words, because I know what they're discussing. So it's an experiment, but those were the early stories. Supersuckers was a script that I was enjoying writing. It was, a lot of, you can maybe sell some high concept stuff to TV networks here, but for the most part, they will never put it on the air. So I kind of realized that if I wanted to realize this dream of these characters, it might be a fun way to go to do it as a comic. And that was what happened with Supersuckers and Z People. And Telepathetic actually did exist as a pilot. I'd sold it to Nickelodeon, and that we didn't end up going forward because of casting things. But it was just one of those things where the people I'd worked with were like, you should do this as a book. And I was terrified of the idea of writing a prose book, but coming up with a comic book version, it was actually really fun. And I found an artist, Blair Shedd, who just had this great cartoony style that really matched the characters perfectly. So.
Oh yeah, it works. It works great.
And he's working on issue 2 of that. That's been delayed a bit, but there will be more Telepathetic adventures, and I think the second one's probably funnier than the first. It's just building on the world now that we know who's who.
That's cool. That's cool to hear.
Yeah.
And you can bring back Z People, because there is a void now.
Yeah, I guess so. And Tom's game. I just, at a certain point, because I just want to make sure that I get everything I need to do it right. And,
right.
And I need to get. Sometimes it's the ideas aren't there. I have a few thoughts on where that story can go, but I haven't quite nailed down anything. And when you're spending your own money, you don't want to just go off the deep end and just go for something that's not quite right.
Right.
And it's just going to take time. But I sort of got sidetracked with Barbara Macabre, which is that backup story in Z People, because I had a couple more ideas, and I'm definitely going to see that through to getting a 64-page edition of that before I turn back to Z People, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. We're cool with Barbara Macabre. That's no big deal.
Awesome. Yeah. Well,
yeah, we're not going to complain.
Good.
We love that stuff.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's definitely it's really fun because I'm such an anonymous person in TV. I've had really cool experiences, but you don't really maybe be. I guess now with more of the Twitter stuff, you could engage with the public, but people don't really pay attention to the writing credits. But I definitely feel like where I get different experiences with the people who've engaged with Blue Baron particularly, but all the comics. Supersuckers gets a lot of people to have feedback. There's fan fiction of Supersuckers on the Archie boards, so I'm pleased.
Awesome.
I'm pleased about that. But I can't read it because I'm afraid it'll influence what I do. But I do know it exists, and that's kind of fun. But it's just a constantly evolving experience where I actually get to talk to people who've like yourselves, who've read the books, and I can hear from you, and we can talk to each other about what you liked and didn't like, and that's something I hadn't gotten much of in TV. Certainly not a two-way conversation.
Gonna have to check out that board.
I think it's Archie fans, yeah. So yeah, if you're missing your characters and Supersuckers, you can find some stuff there. Probably don't tell me if you think it's better because I don't want to know.
No, like you said, we don't want to influence you one way or the other. You do your thing. And
yeah, Jeff's working on issue 5. He just finished the second act. It was funny because I was doing a pilot for Netflix toward the end of last year and the early part of this year when he had time, and then as soon as I sort of got what I needed done on that, I came back to him and said, "Hey, I'm trying to get this thing done before San Diego. How's it going?" And he was just waylaid with so much Archie stuff that we couldn't get our schedules together to put out another issue for San Diego. So it could be a while till you see anything in print. The digital stuff should be coming sooner than later, but because, like I said, he's already done with the 40 pages of it. But I don't intend to just rush to put that out into print, since it doesn't really figure into my plans to do another print run right yet.
Right, which is part of the joys of being a small press, is that you're kind of limited on how often you can do stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's a mixed blessing. You know, you'd like to have endless resources and endless opportunity to just sort of do everything you can imagine doing, but like anyone else, you can't. You have to put the brakes on at some point. And you know, I'm thinking through what the best way to present this company to the bigger audience that's out there. And I'm still figuring it out, but that there definitely is going to be a different way of Sid Comics is going to get out there in a different way next year. But right now, I'm just happy with the way it's been going so far. So with the new books, I think, and I'm glad that you all enjoyed that third Blue Baron, because it's and that's the one I sent. I should have sent them all, but I didn't think to do that. But it's really realizing the dream that I had as a kid to do that book.
Do you have any plans to change things on how you get your books out? I know you do a push of, hey, contact your retailer about reaching out to us about getting our books in your store. Has anybody talked to you about actually approaching Diamond, or are you just going, well, you know what, this is working right now, let's keep going this route?
Well, it's partially there's all sorts of ways to do it, as you can imagine. I had a meeting last summer with Steve Jeppe, who I had grown up in the area where his store was, and I had shopped at his store when I would go on vacation to Baltimore. So I had a personal history with his pre-Diamond distribution days in the comics, and it was a very good conversation. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to work together. But you can't just enter into that Diamond system and put out books when you want, and right. You can't. You have to have enough product to really sustain a regular product flow, and I can't do that the way even if I had endless amounts of money, I was working on shows and I'm doing other things for other reasons, but I could gradually build up a library of titles and a library of material, and once I get to a certain point, which I'm close to, then it makes sense, because if I can put out a different binge book every month for a year or 2 or 3 years, then it makes sense. And I'm getting, like I said, close to that point. Now, obviously, I can't. I've got a plan to start with a totally different book that has not yet been available and it's still being made. That will be the entryway into that other distribution system, because I want something that even people who are familiar with the company have not yet seen. So it will get new people, obviously, because it's getting a whole different audience than what I've been getting sort of doing my own grassroots distribution. But it'll also have the people who've already heard of it and who've already heard of Blue Baron and Supersuckers. It'll hopefully get them engaged because they have yet to see this book. And that's the one I'm doing with Roger Stern is scripting and co-plotting it. And Ron and Sal will be drawing it. So that's Heroes Union #1. So that will be the once you see that book, it will almost certainly be distributed in a bigger and better way than any of the stuff I've done so far has been.
That's a pretty good tease right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I'm not the Stan Lee level, but I do know that you got to at least give some indication that even better stuff is coming. So that's what I got.
Well, that's cool that Roger Stern's going to be involved too. There you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's fantastic, and his plot's already done, and it's excellent. I mean, it's sort of something we'd worked out, or I had sort of come up with an area and a way to do it, and it ties in with the last scene in Startup and the first scene, or close to the first scene in Blue Baron. So it's a really nice. It sort of snugly fits right between those two books, the first issue of each of those, and I'm really happy about the way that worked out. But Roger just took the ball and ran with it, and he came up with so much great stuff. And yeah, it's a huge. It's not just great to. It's like the work is fun, and then the fact that I'm working with these people who I grew up just idolizing, or at least I realized in hindsight that their stuff was what I was most enjoying as a kid. I mean, Roger's stuff on Peter Parker's The Spectacular Spider-Man was excellent. The Hulk run he did was just like amazing. He did the great stuff with John Byrne for Captain America. I mean, and then a great run on Amazing Spider-Man. There's so much stuff that I was in the right age at the right time, and he was doing these amazing issues month after month, and I was just like, just that fandom is never going away, and just the fact that the reality is better than the fan imagination of what these people will be like. It's so great.
That is cool.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, because I mean every issue I open up and I'm looking at these names and going, wow.
Yeah, and you always hear people say, "Don't meet your heroes," and you're sitting here as living proof, going, "Yes, meet your heroes, please."
Yeah,
They're
I
awesome.
recommend it. I've met, and I heard you guys talk in an early episode about Monty Python. I've been lucky enough to meet several of the Pythons. I've met, obviously, I worked with Jerry Seinfeld after I was already a fan, and the cast of Seinfeld. Larry David. There's so many people who I've been fortunate enough to be around, and not only be around, but to actually get to know on a daily basis. Not the Pythons, but other folks who I've just come to recognize as being amazing, and then I get the opportunity to be around them and see what great people they are. And I could say the same about Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David. Worked with them for 3 full years as their assistant, and then I ended up writing some episodes and working on other stuff. And it's just I've been like living a dream. And if you have an opportunity to meet your heroes without scaring them, because you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, if you can meet them in a natural way, definitely go for it, because you have a reason to talk to them. They're important to you, and you can at least let them know that.
Right, and the key there is the natural way, I think, because
Yeah.
you're more likely to scare people off if you just run up, "Oh, I'm your biggest fan," blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
No, take a pill.
And I
calm
think
down.
exactly. And I think when I was in a lucky place was getting to work with them when I was 22, 23. So you're not looked at as a threat. You're a person who they don't mind telling go get coffee or do this other stuff because, what do you know? You're just a kid, essentially. And it's important, I think, that if you have those opportunities, go for them. And the sooner you do them, the easier it'll be.
Okay, any other questions, guys?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say I will be waiting. I'm not going to push you, but I'm ready for whatever you've got coming.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I mean, there's no pushing. It's just I'm glad that these books are out into the world and that they've found the people who found them have enjoyed them. I'm just at the start of getting these next 4 stories into the people's hands, and so I'm not thinking too hard about what's next. But I was talking with Ron Friends, and I said I've got the first act of issue 4 figured out, which picks up those slightly. I mean, it's the story is self-contained, as you know, but I did try to dangle a couple of things that will be tantalize you for issue 4, and I think that what I've got in mind for how to pay those off is really going to be fun for people who enjoyed the series so far. I'm talking about Blue Baron, obviously.
Well, cool.
Yes, I did see some teasers in there, so
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, how is this going to be resolved? What's going to happen there? How did Ernie screw it up? So yeah,
Exactly.
I'm ready for it.
All right. I'm happy to hear that. And like I say, I'm still giving you a 64-page complete story, but I can't help but keep that little dangling thing at the very end that makes you want to go, okay, give me the next one.
Yep.
Because that's an
Absolutely.
important part of comics.
That's the deal, right?
Exactly.
You're in this. You're selling books. I mean, it's that simple. And
yeah.
little teasers here and there. That's what keeps people coming back.
Good. Yep. So yeah, I'm sorry if this was a little dry, but I do love I do love to talk comics, and it just makes sense to get into every subject that I'm passionate about, and I'm definitely passionate about making comics and trying to make comics in a different way than most publishers are making them.
It's been a fun ride so far, Darin, and I do thank you for that.
Excellent. And I'm not sure in terms of just the final plug for people who have heard what I had to say and who want to try the books. You can find my website is www.sitcomics.net, and I do encourage you to contact if you're a comic book fan, and presumably if you're listening to this show, you're probably pretty entrenched in comic book loving. You should try to find your local shop's owner or manager and let them know that you want to try these books, because they're 64 pages for $3.99, and I'd love to get more and more stores organically to start stocking them, and that's the only really way to do it, because I could tell every store in the country that I have a comic book that their customers will want to buy, but until their customers tell them that they want to buy them, they have no reason to believe me. So it's important for people to understand that relationship. And, I even if I spent thousands and millions of dollars on marketing, that's still the deal. You'd have to go in and tell them what you're interested in and that you want to try these books. So I would encourage everybody who has heard what I had to say and want to try the books, go to your store and let them know that this is something you're interested in. And you can share the website address and take it from there. But there's no reason you can't get these comics. They all exist and they're in print. The only thing that's keeping that from happening is the ease with which to get them to you. And I don't really think that selling direct to the public is as good as getting a store who can sell to more than just you invested in trying the books. And that's why I forced everyone to try this to tell their stores.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming on. We would love to have you on again down the road. And good luck at San Diego. I hope it's a success for you. And we can't wait to get our hands on the next binge books.
All right. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you guys and to your listeners. And it's been a real pleasure. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Darin.
Thank you, Darin.
And we're back, and it's time for our weekly picks. And I lead off this week. And so for my first choice, I'm going with a new book from Red 5 Comics. That's a publisher we don't hear from too often, but when we do, it's usually something good, and this sounds like it's going to be good. It's called Dark Age. And takes place in a near future where all of a sudden the metal on a planet turns into dust and rust. So we basically go back to the Dark Ages and have to defend ourselves with whatever else exists on the planet. This sounds like a cool concept. It's kind of like a post-apocalyptic type thing, but it's not, which is cool.
Right, like a shocking reversal of technology type
Yes,
thing. Yep, I think it sounds cool too.
I like the premise a lot. This could be a very interesting series.
Yep.
Alrighty, Les.
Well, for my first choice comes Archie versus Predator 2. This is from Archie Comics, and it is obviously the sequel to the Archie versus Predator series from several years ago. In this one, Betty Veronica and Predator Archie have been left in the wreckage of their town. Their friends are dead, and according to the statistic they give here, they say they would just go down memory lane and get home again, where everything is back to normal. But in this, the predators of Mars are watching them and planning their next attack. I enjoyed the first series. I'm ready for this one to see how things turn out. It is a 5-issue series, so just latch on and hang on.
Sounds like a party.
The first series was a trip, and this series is also being written by Alex DeCampi. I just remember the first issue being it was just like a normal Archie issue of Archie, with the exception of every once in a while you see a Predator take out a character.
Right.
And that's it. And then starting with the second issue is when the bloodshed started. And it just did not end until the series ended. And it was such a wild ride. So I can't imagine where we're going to go from here. But it's Alex DeCampi, so it's going to be another wild ride. Yeah, I'm on board for this one.
Yep, sounds cool.
Alrighty, Mikey.
Alrighty, so my first pick it's from Image Comics, and this is actually the trade this is a collected series of issues 1 through 6 of a book called Self-Made. This is an interesting one because the main character, a young woman named Amala, very early on in this series discovers that she's not real. She is a character in a video game. She's like a background character in a video game. But she apparently has become aware. And so the story then kind of shifts. It kind of bounces back and forth between in-game and out-of-game, with the developers of the game figuring all this out, and some of them freaking out and trying to shut the thing down, and others trying to help this completely aware AI escape and somehow get out into the real world. And so it's a really interesting story in that regard. It's just I hesitate to call it a wild ride after you guys called Archie versus Predator that, but it really does kind of bend reality quite a bit. It's a lot of fun.
Intriguing.
Yep. Sounds very interesting. Yep, definitely need to check that one out. I'm up again, so for my second choice, I'm going with a standalone epilogue called Marvel's Epilogue. Obviously, this is from Marvel Comics. Written by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross, with art by Alex Ross. If you're familiar with the miniseries Marvels that came out so many years ago, it was such a great read. Well, this is a somewhat of a follow-up, but this takes place during the 70s, and it's a look at basically the Claremont, Cockrum / Byrne X-Men. But it's also bringing back Phil Sheldon, who is the main character, who is the photographer, who was was working for the Bugle in Marvels and was taking the pictures and experiencing basically the birth of the Marvel universe. So I would love to read this because I enjoyed Marvel so much, and it seems like it's high time for somewhat of a follow up. So here we go.
Nice.
I'm a big fan of Marvels also, so this should be fun.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, Les.
My second choice is Dead End Kids from Source Point. This is, I don't want to say it's a mystery, but it is more of a coming-of-age story. And in 1999, according to this, there are 4 teenagers from broken homes that pool together. But then when one of them is murdered, the others decide to try to find out who done it. But they find themselves in danger. So I want to see this because I am a mystery guy, yet this could be something, to me it could possibly be along the lines of like Paper Girls, where they give you the information, but when they continue, you go in different directions. So hopefully that's what they do, but I'm sure it's going to be a strong story either way.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, this was on my list, so I'm definitely intrigued. Alrighty, Mikey.
Okie dokie. My second pick is a Dark Horse title, and this is Aliens Rescue #1. This is I guess, I don't want to call it a sequel because I don't think it really is. I think it's a continuation of just an extended story from Brian Wood. This kind of, he's been writing some Alien series, and he's kind of tying them together. This one, for example, the main character in this is the kid that the characters in the last series, Aliens Resistance, rescued. And so it's kind of a few years later, and he's actually gone on and joined the Colonial Marines, and this is kind of his story now. So I like that this is turning into kind of like a long extended story about this kind of the same characters. I think that's cool, and it's a fun story too. So.
Yep.
And I think that's the way this one should be presented.
Yeah, as kind of an extension, kind of more story.
Right.
Yeah, like this is like the third series that Wood's written, and they've all tied together. It's pretty neat.
That's pretty cool that they were able to do that.
Yep.
Because before it's been pretty much just standalone ones. So there's a little continuity here.
Yep.
And you're following up 2 characters that you've already been invested with. So that's good. Alrighty. Since we do not have lists with us this week, we all have a third pick. And so for my third pick, I'm going with a title from Source Point Press as well. And it's called Comic for Flint, Hope. It's a one-shot by various writers and artists. And it's 5 stories that all take place in Flint, Michigan. And the thing that's really cool about this is all proceeds to this book go to the Compass, which is a Michigan Community Services Incorporated program aiding adults with developmental disabilities. And the reason is that there's been a large increase in such disabilities since the water crisis began. So that's really cool that this book is helping support those people who need the assistance. I think that's an awesome deal to do that.
Yep, very cool.
I agree.
Alrighty, Les.
Since Liz isn't here, I'm going to give you my third pick and just warn her that she gets to pick all of ours next week.
Ooh, there's an idea.
My third choice.
Now he's throwing her underneath the bus.
They told me, they made me say it, Liz. If I'm going to throw under the bus, I may as well throw everybody.
I guess.
My third pick is Monster World from American Gothic Press. This intrigues me because, yes, it has a private detective, so I'm all ready for this one. Hank Barrymore has stumbled upon the occult when he was investigating a murder at the World Studios movie set. So in this one, he has to find the witch that he fell in love with, and is helped by Nibis, the demon of knowledge, and follows the clues to the state of Oklahoma, where a farm boy is planting fear into the hearts of monsters and townspeople alike. So you've got monsters, you've got movies, you've got detective. I'm in on this.
Yeah, this is right up your alley.
Mm-hmm. And Oklahoma, too.
Oh, and Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, we'll try not to hold that against it.
I almost said something, but I was like, no.
It's good to know that the buses are arriving on time.
Oh, yeah, there's a schedule for them and everything, man. It's great. Plenty of them to go around.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, Mike.
Okay, so my third pick is from IDW, and I'm picking Star Pig #1. Despite the interesting name, this is a kind of a near future thing, late 21st century. A 16-year-old girl goes off to space camp, which, this being the future, is actually in space. And there is a bit of a shuttle accident, which kind of results in the shuttle getting kind of flung off away from Earth, and the usual expectation would be certain death. But the shuttle is rescued by, and I'm quoting here, a gigantic spacefaring water bear. It sounds like a really wild story, and it's written by Delilah S. Dawson, so it's bound to be a good one. So I think it's definitely worth checking out.
Pigs in space.
Mm-hmm.
It does sound interesting, yes.
I like it.
They both were giving me crap before we started recording here too, by the way, for this one. I think just based on the title. But you know, sometimes you have to look past the title. You can't judge a book by its cover.
Who, us?
But you can judge it by the title. It's okay. It's all right. Okay.
It's going to be fun. I don't care what y'all say. Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be fun. Alrighty. Any special shout-outs this week? Obviously, thank you, Darin, for being on with us.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Yep, I enjoyed that a lot. And obviously, Liz, I hope to see you back next week. Hope everything's okay.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, that too. Anything else? Any other special shout-outs this week?
Not this week.
Nothing here.
Okay. Obviously, go to our regular shout-outs. First off, to Pop Goes the Culture for allowing us to be part of their podcast network. We do appreciate their support. Obviously, we encourage you to go check out our fellow podcast shows. We'll have a link in the show notes. And we encourage you to also check out our fellow members of Darin family on Twitter. Thank you guys for supporting us by sharing our links to our episodes. And the easiest way for y'all to go check out their stuff is just go to Twitter and do a search, #PotterFamily, and just scroll around, and you find something that catches your fancy. Just click on that link, download that episode, and have some fun. Thank you guys for your support as always. Want to thank Manny the Martyr for supplying the music to our podcast. Appreciate that as always. Definitely check out their music. We'll have a link in the show notes as well. And obviously you, dear listener, thank you for downloading and listening to today's episode. We appreciate your support as always. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, question, comment, suggestion, complaint, observation, whatever, we would love to hear from you. Please contact us. And there are several ways you can do that. You can contact us on our website. You just click on the About Us tab at www.thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. And there's a contact form you can fill out. Or you can send an email, and that email address is email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. Feel free to follow us on social media. Our Facebook page is The Fellowship of the Geeks. And on Twitter, we are @FellowshipGeeks. If you'd like to follow our personal Twitter accounts, by all means. Mike can be found @MikeyGeek. Liz can be found @LN_geek. And I can be found @TomTCGeek. And we highly wish that you would rate and review our episodes from wherever you download our episodes. Please, please, please do so. It's always appreciated when you do that. Any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Just thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening, people, friends. We always appreciate your support. And until next time, geek on, my friends.
We thank you for listening to the show. Comments, suggestions, and questions can be sent to email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. You can follow us on Facebook @The Fellowship of the Geeks and on Twitter @FellowshipGeeks. Until next time,